Hey everyone, it's Sevy. So I managed to pull the new 4-star polearm Wavebreaker's Fin, and knowing just how much value an R1 Akumaru gives, I was very excited to test out the new polearm. In this video, I'm going to show you my damage test of Wavebreaker's Fin versus my other polearms and an overall analysis of its pros and cons. As always, I advise against trying to snipe this if you're a low spender or free-to-play, and ideally you'll only get this from trying to get the 5-star weapon on the banner. But if you got this incidentally, then let's see how worth it is to build. Let's dive in. I'll first explain my methodology. First, I pulled this polearm on my mid-spender account, which only has the other 4-star polearms to compare with, and no 5 stars except the Staff of Foma, which I won't compare it with. We're going to pit the Wavebreaker's Fin against an R5 The Catch, R1 Deathmatch, and an R5 Dragon Bane. Although I have the Favonius Lance, it's more of a support weapon and the passive doesn't contribute to damage, so it's going to sit this one out. Second, to keep things streamlined, I'm consistently testing this on Xiangling, who is also arguably the top candidate for this polearm. This is a character that everyone has, and there's this huge joke that every patch is an indirect Xiangling buff, and I totally agree. We live in Xiangling impact. Third, this is primarily a damage test. I compare the crit hit non-reaction damage and crit hit reaction damage so we can see the damage output differences. However, it's also important to note the other factors outside of damage that players should consider, which I'll be discussing too. Fourth, Xiangling is on a 4-piece emblem build, and thanks to her Ascension stat, she gets an innate EM bonus. These artifacts are currently the best build I have since I haven't hyper-invested in raising Xiangling. I then tested all the weapons while alternating between an attack percent and EM sands, but to streamline my discussion, I'll mainly stick with comparing the weapons on an attack sands and will only mention the difference of the attack and EM sands when discussing the Dragon Bane, since it's more relevant there. As for Deathmatch, I will mention my switch from a crit rate to crit damage circlet too. Finally, I'll be using the Kazuha national team, and will be using the same rotations throughout all the tests against the Primo Geo Bishop. Now let's go over the weapons, all of which are 80 out of 80 due to severe ore shortage, unfortunately. Our new challenger, the Wavebreaker's Fin, has the highest base attack of all 4-star polearms with an attack percent substat. At level 80 out of 80, it has a 545 base attack with a 12.5% attack substat. On R1, its passive provides the user with an elemental burst damage bonus based on the team's total energy capacity, capping at 40% burst damage bonus. On the team I'm using, which has an energy total of 280, the resulting bonus is 33.6%. Next is the Catch, our permanent free-to-play weapon. At level 80 out of 80, it has a base attack of 449 with a substat of 41.9% energy recharge. On Refinement 5, it gives a burst damage bonus of 32% and an added burst crit rate of 12%. Generally speaking, the Catch gives a bit of everything: ER for burst uptime, and if on an emblem build, burst damage, burst crit rate for consistency, and a burst damage bonus. In terms of practical use and build, these are all important considerations, but I'll get back to that later. The Dragon Bane has a very low base attack of 401 at level 80 out of 80, but it compensates with a high EM substat at 201. Its passive on R1 provides a 20% damage bonus against enemies affected by Hydro and Pyro. On R5, that goes up to 36%, and mine is already at R5. Lastly, we have the Deathmatch. It is tied for lowest base attack with Dragon Bane at 401 attack at level 80 out of 80, but with a 33.5% crit rate substat. Its passive increases attack depending on how many opponents are nearby. So again, I'll be testing all these weapons at level 80 out of 80. The rookie Wavebreaker's Fin is at R1 going against an R5 The Catch, an R5 Dragon Bane, and an R1 Deathmatch. Let's see how good of a fight it puts up. First is R1 Wavebreaker against an R5 Dragon Bane. Here are my stats for each weapon while Xiangling is on an attack stance. You can see the Wavebreaker's high base attack really paying off here. Wavebreaker delivered 21.4k on a non-reaction crit and 41.8k vape crit damage.
Dragon Bane dealt 18.8k non-reaction damage and 41.9k vape damage. In terms of non-reaction pyro damage, the Wavebreaker wins by 14%, but in reaction damage, thanks to the EM of the Dragon Bane, it wins, but only by less than 1%. An impressive start for the Wavebreaker considering it's up against an R5 weapon. But what if we use an EM Sans instead? The resulting damage is impressive. The Wavebreaker's reaction damage is now at 45.4k, noticeably higher than the Dragon Bane's 43.3k. So in the case of Xiangling's burst, the Wavebreaker does win in reaction damage given balanced EM and attack stats. Next is the R1 Wavebreaker against an R1 Deathmatch. Since Deathmatch has a crit rate substat, an optimal build will use a crit damage circlet. Switching my circlet means losing 8% energy recharge, which, because of the emblem set, results in a 2% burst damage bonus loss. Note as well that I lose 35 EM on my Deathmatch build, which results in 4.5% less reaction damage. Deathmatch also results in a lower attack stat, but it has a higher crit rate and crit damage. Comparing the damage output, Deathmatch dealt 20k non-reaction damage and 39.6k vape damage. Wavebreaker's damage output was greater both in non-reaction and reaction damage, but by only a small margin. You might think that Deathmatch ultimately loses this battle, but remember that its build is disadvantaged in EM and energy recharge. So after computing a Deathmatch build with the same EM and ER as the Wavebreaker build, it will match the Wavebreaker. This, coupled with the opportunity to build higher crit damage stats and get in more crit hits, thanks to the Deathmatch's crit rate substat, ultimately makes it an easier weapon to build your damage with. Just remember that the Deathmatch gives a smaller attack bonus if you're facing 2 or more enemies, so there would be a slight difference in that case. In our last challenge, we put the Wavebreaker against a fully fished R5 The Catch. On The Catch, Xiangling's energy recharge stat reaches 209%, which, on a full emblem build, is converted into more burst damage bonus. So let's see who wins. Against the Wavebreaker, The Catch dealt 20k non-reaction damage and 38.9k vape damage. Wavebreaker wins in damage by a small margin of 7%. But does that mean it's automatically a better weapon? Not necessarily. The Catch has its ER substat and additional burst crit rate going for it. The ER stat of the Catch is very essential to characters like Xiangling and even the Raiden Shogun because of their large burst costs. If you want good burst uptime, you either get very lucky in energy recharge rolls, use an energy recharge weapon, or use an energy recharge sans. With Xiangling on the Catch and an emblem build, you'll have to worry less about ER and crit rate substats, and you can allocate more to attack, crit damage, and EM stats. The Wavebreaker will do more damage, but raw damage alone is only one side. Burst uptime, energy recharge, and crit rate are all factors as well, and unless you really hyper-invest in building Xiangling, the Catch is more advantageous in those aspects. So after testing all this, what do I think of the Wavebreaker's Fin and would I recommend it? Well, even just an R1, its damage is undeniable. Even though its substat looks really underwhelming, that high base attack takes care of itself, and just like the Akumaru, the passive is amazing. I think that the Wavebreaker's Fin, especially on Xiangling and Raiden, is an extremely viable weapon given that you build your other stats well. But if you're generally unlucky with artifact rolls or want to spend less time in an artifact domain, I would highly recommend sticking with the Catch. Of course, that would mean using your time for fishing instead. This polearm would also be excellent for Rosaria, who has a lower burst cost, so you don't need to worry about ER too much, and who scales on attack percent. And fingers crossed that there will be a future character who will be able to further maximize the weapon's potential. So that's going to be all for this video, everyone. I hope it helped you out regarding the new, very fashionable Wavebreaker's Fin. I think this weapon series is honestly cracked, but comment down below what you think. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, and turn on the bell button for future Genshin Impact videos. I will see you soon. Take care!